My name is Audrey Anastasi. I'm an artist, and I also have an art gallery. I also sit on the board of some not-for-profits, so I'm involved in all different aspects of visual art. I always considered myself an artist as a child, and I think that it was kind of a refuge for me. I was happy to work for hours and hours with my crayons and my pencils, and I was not an athletic child, and my world was always close. Maybe because I'm nearsighted, and as a child, that was the world that gave me the most satisfaction and the best feedback from the adults in my life. This body of work has been a gift for me in terms of a vehicle, an opportunity for very deep expression. Michael Valentine brought the suggestion to me of working with the theme of migration, especially forced migration. And I hesitated at first, thinking this might be a little bit outside of my wheelhouse, but I felt a very passionate desire to attempt this. And once I got started, it was like letting the horse out of the stable. I just really got so involved with doing the work. This tapped into the same process that I used for the Stations of the Cross. And that process was to imagine putting myself in a situation and to paint purely as a conversation between the paint and myself. I would put down the paint, move it around, and the images would emerge. And like I say, it was a great opportunity for me to express something deeper that I didn't know I could do. I think the goal was to do a series, a multitude of works. The individual works were not really pre-planned. The images come, I would say, 95% from my imagination, and the remaining 5% would be from TV and news articles and images that we saw repeated and repeated and that become part of your consciousness, and you almost don't even know you've seen them before. It's just a part of the way or the way I approached the subject. And usually, as I said, it started with a blob of paint, so it was kind of a mix of process and purpose. I didn't title them individually. I just was working through. And it's more that each sort of group within the series could have a title. There's water, there's multitudes, the masses of people streaming along to leave their homes. Fences, you know, the idea of being separated, of being contained. Boats, you know, laden with humans desperate to get someplace where they and their family could live. There is velocity in the way that they're painted. The work is on passport folios that were originally used to put a photograph in. In the old days, you would get a photograph taken, and they would slide it in this folio so it wouldn't get crushed before you got to send it into the passport agency. Printed on it are all kinds of little tips for travel. This was a really good substrate to use for this series because the people and the situations depicted here are not travel for business, not travel for pleasure, not travel for education. This was desperate leaving of your home situation. And the words that are on there become a little bit ironic. Traveling with the camera, you know, take these tips, et cetera, et cetera. So I started with that, but the other interesting thing about this substrate is that it's very smooth. It's a plasticized paper. So if you recall being a really little child and doing finger painting, the paint moves around very easily on this, and that played very nicely into part of my philosophy and part of my technique as an artist. I'm always trying to figure out ways to kind of jump ahead of being overly self-conscious. The rafts are one of the dramatic news stories over and over again. People desperately climbing into these rafts, having no idea whether they're going to make it to dry land again, and using this approach where I physically put myself, in my imagination. The idea of being soaked, of being uncomfortable, of being wet and cold and really miserable inspired me to kind of concentrate on these boats. And, in the stories, sometimes the people who were manning these boats knew that people weren't going to get there, but they took their money and put them on the boats anyway. So it's very symbolic of the tragic proportions of this kind of exodus. I actually started the smaller pieces, the whole project, when I was recovering from a surgery. And working on this substrate with these simple materials was a perfect entree into delving into it. And I would work on many at a time because they'd have to dry a little bit and then I'd work a little more. But they all were painted quickly, maybe finish 2 in a session. And then, since this was so predominant in my mind over and over again, I just gave it a try, translating it to a larger format, which basically meant a larger brush, getting on a ladder, trying to envision the piece, starting again with a horizon, and just throwing myself into it more full body physically than, a tabletop concentration. I am truly a child of Western art history, and I guess the 19th century artists, I would say more recently, artists like Anselm Kiefer, that kind of gutsy way of addressing not only the materials, but the themes, the Holocaust. In this theme, I see a little Kath Kolowitz kind of coming to the surface. There have been many artists, Daumier, Goya, Manet, who addressed social ills, and I don't know whether they were activists in their life, but they certainly addressed it in their work. As a child, I loved, the pretty colors in Renoir and Degas, but I would say it's the gutsier artists that speak to me, as an adult practicing artist. These works were specific to the years 2016 to 2019. But sadly, this is a forever kind of problem. The sense of the other, of people being displaced for political, religious, ethnic cleansing, humans trying to escape to a life where they and their families can live and breathe. And since I do feel that as an artist we are addressing universals, I think everybody wants the same thing. They want a healthy, happy family. They want to be productive, work, have satisfaction in life. And often speaking about this, here I am. I'm comfortable. I sleep in clean sheets. I have internet. I have indoor plumbing. When I was doing this, I pictured these were people that were in that same situation one day and carrying their bags of their most essential belongings and trying to keep their children safe and healthy, the next day. And it's not lost on me what a forever problem this is. I think creativity is part of the human spirit. And not to overuse the word universal, cave painters, for whatever reasons, did beautiful images of the bison. And they put their own hand on there and blew pigment on to show their humanity, connection with the basics of life, of getting their food, or maybe worshiping the bison. So I feel that it's inherent in our DNA to be creative in some way or another. I feel that art is a tool for self-actualization, just inherently in the nature of whatever we put down is going to say something about ourselves, whatever our ostensible theme is. And I do feel like it's a great tool to connect over differences, over marginalized community assumptions from either side of that margin. And I feel that it can be a very powerful tool, and many artists are completely focused on social justice and bridging those gaps, and I hope in some way that I can be a part of that. Art as a career is an iffy kind of question. Practically speaking, for most people, you will not get the great satisfaction of having a stellar, public, engaged in the conversation kind of career. However, at the end of the day, whereas most people want to run off and escape their everyday life, an artist has great satisfaction, and it's a privilege. It is a true privilege to be able to say that. When I've spent a day in the studio, even if I've come into a problem and I'm not happy with something, I feel great. I just feel like, how lucky am I, and to have that satisfaction of being able to work on something, to work towards something, and ultimately to create something that people respond to on kind of an unexpected level. You connect in a way that is ineffable.